This is the Week 5 professional case study for the data center project. The meeting documented here is the Week 5 meeting, focused on the minutes and activities recorded for the reporting period from August 27th through September 3rd, 2022. The meeting date is September 3rd, 2022, and this document serves as page 01 of the report. The project is associated with Nexera Engineering and Construction, identified here as the main contractor for both CSA and MEP responsibilities. Those abbreviations indicate the project coverage areas presented in the report, while the detailed discussion and decisions will follow in the subsequent pages. For now, the essential context is the reporting period and the purpose of this document: to establish a formal record of the Week 5 meeting for the data center project. As we move through the minutes, I'll use this opening information as the reference point for understanding which reporting cycle each update belongs to and how the project team's progress is organized. This slide establishes the document and control basis for Week 05 of the data center project. I'm presenting it as a weekly coordination and project control record for the reporting period from August 27th through September 3rd, 2022, with September 3rd as the data date. The record covers the main contractor's CSA and MEP scope, and it is structured as a training case study for a virtual client or developer. The important point is that this is more than a meeting summary. It is a controlled decision record. The week includes 63 separate records spanning health and safety, mobilization, engineering, program, quality, site readiness, authority interfaces, and MEP and commissioning governance. Each record is retained individually, while reported activity is kept distinct from accepted release, installed quantity, and commission status. The governing rule is deliberately strict. A status can become green only when the responsible owner is identified, the data date is clear, objective acceptance evidence is available, and closeout has been verified. That prevents progress from being treated as acceptance before the evidence is complete. This slide provides the navigation for the data center project training case study, covering Week 5 of the monthly operating meeting. It also identifies Nexera Engineering and Construction as the main contractor, with responsibility for both CSA and MEP scopes. The material is organized into 6 sections. First, meeting control and the executive position, covering pages 2 through 7. Second, health, safety, and environment, program, and mobilization on pages 8 through 10. Third, engineering, procurement, quality, and commissioning, or CX, on pages 11 through 14. The largest section is the MEP Systems Report, spanning pages 15 through 35. That is followed by the Week 5 project records and project management analysis, which runs from pages 36 through 98. Finally, the presentation closes with risks, decisions, actions, lessons learned, and priorities for the following week, on pages 99 through 104. The key point is that this structure moves from executive control, through technical and delivery performance, into records, analysis, and forward actions. This slide gives the Week 5 control position as of September 3rd, and the central message is clear. Progress is only credible when it is supported by release evidence. The record shows 0 incidents across 31,670 man-hours, with 194 personnel and roughly 50 plant units, plus 1 tool lot. Mobilization is active, site office and piling preparation are underway, and both CSA and MEP engineering and procurement registers are in place. Trial mix and rebar testing are also progressing. The main exposures are at the interfaces. Official permission for the principal activities is not yet demonstrated. PLN relocation has moved to a 3rd target date. Gas relocation shows no activity, access remains obstructed, and test pile preparation must be coordinated with live underground services. Engineering aging, quality disposition, and MEP package gates also need stronger links to construction need dates and acceptance. Before Week 6, management must close the permit, utility, and access releases, authorize the piling workfronts, resolve aging engineering, reconcile MEP packages through testing and delivery, and accept the plant, HSE, and quality release packs. Every predecessor ID stays open until closure is verified. This Week 05 Executive Dashboard gives us the current position of the data center project and, more importantly, the level of control confidence behind it. HSE performance is positive, with 0 incidents recorded across 31,670 hours and 64 days. The workforce totals 194 people, and plant is reported as 50 items plus 1 lot, although release and utilization still need verification. The main concerns are in engineering, site readiness, program control, and utility interfaces. Engineering need date aging remains open, while permits, utilities, and access are constraining early works. The planned test and board pile gates are unresolved, gas activity has not started, and access remains blocked. Quality trials are active, but the accepted dossier is still open. MEP and commissioning readiness is limited to procurement gates, with no installation credit yet. The key conclusion is overall control valuation remains red. Week 05 provides current evidence and visible mobilization, but it does not yet prove unrestricted workfront release, accepted quantities, or system completion. Official permissions, live utility interfaces, access, engineering need dates, and successor gate evidence could still stop the planned sequence. This executive control matrix turns project status into decisions. It shows each KPI domain with its Week 05 position, the Week 06 acceptance gate, the current RAG status, and the project manager response. The key principle is that progress is not accepted until the required evidence and controls are in place. HSE, workforce, plant, quality, and MEP commissioning are amber, meaning controls or supporting evidence still need to be demonstrated. Engineering, site readiness, program, and utilities are red, with specific recovery actions focused on dispositions, drawing and RFI gaps, permit and access acceptance, logic-linked predecessor gates, and a coordinated utility forecast. Commercial is marked open because certified valuation, change, and forecast data has not yet been reported. The responses are deliberately action-oriented. They assign workfront controls, productivity measures, plant packs, traceable quality records, and commissioning evidence, while preventing early activity from being counted as accepted installed progress. Finally, every KPI must include a data date, owner, target, current value, variance, RAG logic, and a decision-oriented narrative. That rule makes the dashboard auditable and useful for weekly control. This slide reviews the Week 04 carry-forward commitments against the Week 05 evidence. The key principle is evidence, not narrative. An action remains open until the accountable owner provides objective proof and the defined verifier accepts it. Several items remain critical. Board pile mobilization is visible, but permits, utilities, and access are still gating the work. Engineering replies have started to appear, yet aging, revision routing, and construction need dates remain unresolved. The PLN date has moved to September 8th, while gas relocation shows no activity. Plant and logistics mobilization, along with testing, are active, but the accepted release dossiers are still open. The review also confirms that MEP and commissioning ownership, boundaries, tags, and approval gates remain at early control levels, and that all open are 04, D04, and A04 identifiers must continue into Week 06. The important distinction is between activity and closure. Progress may be visible, but status changes only when verification is complete. This control spine keeps the project focused on accountable, auditable closeout rather than optimistic reporting. This Week 5 HSE snapshot combines outcome measures with the controls that should explain them. The headline results are 0 reported incidents, 31,670 cumulative man-hours, 64 days worked, and 121 people on site, 60 core workers and 61 field workers, measured through September 3, 2022. These figures are important, but they are lagging indicators. A 0 incident result is not, by itself, proof that risk is controlled. The management test is whether leading evidence supports the outcome. For induction and competence, we need unique personnel, roles, validity, and exceptions, confirming that people are qualified for high-risk work. Toolbox talks should identify the task, hazards, crew, supervisor, and attendance, and match the actual workfront. Inspections and observations need owners, due dates, risk classifications, and proof of closeout, with recurring findings declining. Incident and near-miss investigations must address causes and verify actions before work accelerates. Finally, permits for lifting, excavation, electrical, hot work, and confined spaces must align with current drawings and isolations. This is how HSE performance becomes evidence-based rather than simply a favorable number. This slide presents the Week 05 program control position for the data center project, using a September 3rd data date and a current look-ahead dated September 2nd. Mobilization and early works are active, but the piling sequence remains exposed to 3 external gates: official permission, live utility relocation, and access conditions. The critical issue is not simply whether resources are visible on site, but whether the work can be released through approved logic, measurable quantities, and signed evidence. The reported status is red for both major engineering streams. CSA first submissions total 67 items, including MAR, shop drawing, WMS, and RFI activities. MEP shows 54 MAR items and 5 replies, with drawing, WMS, and RFI gates still open. These variances need one consistent narrative tied to the same data date. For Week 06, the team must issue one approved program that includes permit, utility, and access milestones, engineering dates linked to construction need, measurable quantities, recovery ownership, and assigned decision releasing, or withholding, test pile and board pile work. That is how the critical path is protected. This slide focuses on mobilization and the point at which resources become productive construction capacity. The register shows 194 people, including 73 core personnel and 121 field personnel, supported by approximately 50 plant units and 1 tool lot. That is useful visibility, but headcount and equipment alone do not mean the site is ready. Resources must convert into officially released workfronts. Before Week 06, the team needs to issue shift and workfront loading, while confirming competence, supervision, certified operators, plant inspections, logistics segregation, and productive utilization. The readiness gates provide the control framework. Design and permit evidence must be current, utilities and access must be verified, and the method and risk documents must be approved. Resources then need certification, maintenance records, and calibrated instruments. Finally, production control must capture daily quantities, constraints, downtime, quality, and photographic evidence. The release authorities are clearly assigned across project leadership, utilities, construction, HSE, QA/QC, planning, and package management. In practical terms, mobilization is complete only when people and plant are matched to a safe, permitted, documented, and measurable workfront. This slide focuses on engineering and document control, governed by the date each item is needed for construction. The central message is simple. Progress is not just the number of submissions. It is whether decisions arrive in time, with the right revision, and reach the field. Recover the gate, not only the count. At this point, CSA has recorded 11 material approval requests, 35 shop drawings, 2 method statements, and 19 RFIs. MEP has 54 material approval requests with 5 replies, 3 approvals, and 2 resubmissions. The immediate control gaps are aging against construction need dates, revision and distribution control, unresolved MEP drawings and methods, and the fuel tank RFI. The table defines 5 practical controls. We need to track response aging, approval quality, and links to activities, purchase orders, or test gates. We also need a named decision owner, with appropriate authority and evidence that closure includes the accepted response, updated drawing or model, and field communication. A text reply alone is not controlled closure. In this context, MAR means material approval request, RFI means request for information, SD means shop drawing, and WMS means work method statement. This week's focus is procurement control, with particular attention to long lead MEP equipment and the evidence needed to protect the project need date and the FAT gate. The central principle is every package must be reconciled from system boundary through installation release. That means connecting the approved technical requirements to the purchase order, vendor information, manufacturing status, testing, delivery, preservation, and the program sequence. The control table defines 5 decision gates. Technical release confirms that specifications, interfaces, drawings, and deviations are complete and configuration controlled. Commercial release checks that comparisons, clarifications, exclusions, and budget approval support a transparent award. The PO and vendor data gate asks whether submittals will arrive in time for design and construction. Manufacture and FAT confirm that testing, witnessing, and punch closure are protected before shipment. Finally, logistics and site need cover customs, delivery, storage, and preservation. The management rule is clear. Acceleration is acceptable only when compliance, interfaces, factory acceptance, and evidence remain intact. In other words, speed cannot come at the expense of control. Key abbreviations here are LLE for long lead equipment, PO for purchase order, FAT for factory acceptance test, and VDR for vendor document register. This slide focuses on quality assurance and quality control for the data center project, with a central principle: release work only when acceptance is traceable. Current activities include the concrete trial mix, crushing tests, and rebar testing. Before any production or structural release, I need to reconcile several links in the evidence chain: the supplier's role, the approved mix or material, batch and sample identity, calibrated equipment, witness points, and the applicable 7-, 14- and 28-day results. Future dated tests are still forecast records, not accepted results. The table shows how this applies across the work. Materials and rebar require approved material requests, certificates, heat numbers, and test results. Concrete requires the approved design mix, trial data, batch tickets, and cube or slump records. Foundations need complete piling and integrity evidence, while inspections and nonconformances require formal closure and verification. Finally, digital turnover must be indexed by system and location, with the correct revision and verifier. In practical terms, no concealed work, repeat defect, or structural element should be accepted until its evidence is complete, retrievable, and formally dispositioned. This slide establishes the commissioning governance model for the data center project. Testing and commissioning sits under MEP delivery, while the client or commissioning advisor provides independent oversight for acceptance. The key point is that procurement activity is not the same as accepted progress. Week 05 now includes MEP procurement registers, allowing CXL0 and CXL1 governance to be assigned by system and package, but it does not yet confirm installed quantities or tagged commissioning results. In week 06, each system must have its owner, boundaries, interfaces, technical release, procurement and FAT dates, builder's work requirements, installation release, testing route, and TMS evidence approved before progress can be claimed. The table shows the complete commissioning path from CXL0 design review and CXL1 factory acceptance, through component verification, receiving and installation readiness, pre-functional testing, functional performance testing, and integrated systems testing. It concludes with CXL6 operational readiness and handover, including training, O&M information, spares, warranties, seasonal testing, and final acceptance. This staged approach protects future acceptance by making requirements and evidence visible early, rather than discovering gaps at handover. This dashboard gives the executive view of MEP evidence status for week 05 and defines the acceptance gates for week 06. The overall position is amber, but the critical concern is design and IFC, which is red. There are 54 MEP material approval requests, only 5 replies, and key drawings, work method statements, and builder's work information are still absent. Procurement is also amber, with packages identified across electrical, mechanical, fire, plumbing, controls, and lifts, but each package still needs a clear path from technical approval through purchase order, vendor data, FAT, and delivery. Builder's work, vertical and special systems, and commissioning and turnover management remain open. That means interfaces, access, drainage, maintainability, certification, and tagged handover evidence must be controlled before work is closed. The mechanical, electrical, life safety, and digital security domains are amber, requiring their technical baselines, testing routes, and interface responsibilities to be frozen. The executive rule is simple: no physical credit from narrative. Every system must report its boundary, current gate, objective evidence, owner, need date, interface risk, next gate, and required decision. This slide establishes the control basis for the data center project's MEP governance, using a gate-based model that can be reused from week 05 through week 110. The immediate week 05 objective is to approve 4 foundations: the MEP responsibility matrix, the system register, the TMS hierarchy, and the design review plan. The operating rules are organized across 5 control layers. At the system level, each system needs one owner, a defined boundary, an agreed duty and standby philosophy, and a stated criticality. Package controls connect design, procurement, FAT, delivery, and preservation to the required need date. Interface controls name the boundaries between CSA, MEP, controls, utilities, and authorities. Acceptance controls require a verifier, a record, and a successor release before anything can be shown as green. Finally, every open forecast gate needs an owner, due date, and program impact. The week 06 outputs are therefore evidence-based registers, signed matrices, TMS-linked inspection and testing records, and a system forecast with escalation. Where evidence is missing, the status remains open, or to be established, rather than being treated as green. This slide presents the MEP system readiness matrix for week 5, covering the main systems that support the data center project. The matrix is based on source package evidence, but it distinguishes between documentation being listed and actual readiness for commissioning. Cooling and ventilation, power and standby, fire and life safety, and public health are currently at CXL 0 or CXL 1, with amber status. Their week 6 acceptance depends on confirming system boundaries, design loads, redundancy, technical approvals, interfaces, and factory acceptance testing. Fuel is the only red item. At this stage, the generator fuel tank is listed and an RFI is being prepared, but storage and transfer boundaries, safety requirements, controls, and authority approvals still need to be established. The key rule is that RAG status can only be assigned when the owner, the September 3rd data date, the system boundary, the next gate, and the acceptance evidence are all confirmed. Procurement presence indicates early readiness, but it does not represent installed, tested, or commissioned progress. The abbreviations shown here include RAG for red, amber, green, CX for commissioning, and AHJ for authority having jurisdiction. This slide completes the MEP system readiness matrix for week 05. The key message is that package visibility has improved, but acceptance evidence is still incomplete. Procurement presence does not equal installed, tested, or commissioned progress. Controls, ICT, and security packages are listed, but the next gate still requires clear network and points boundaries, cybersecurity responsibilities, and ownership of FAT, SAT, and IST. Vertical transport is also at the early CXL 0/CXL 1 stage, with shaft, power, fire recall, rescue, and certification interfaces still needing acceptance. Special systems are more open. WLD is listed, while direct evidence for CPOS, IoT, and BMU is not established. Turnover management has no tagged testing or turnover evidence reported, so asset tags, templates, punch ownership, and verification hierarchy remain necessary. Overall, the status is amber, with the readiness baseline needing to carry into the integrated program. RAG status should be assigned only when the owner, data date, system boundary, next gate, and acceptance evidence are confirmed. In short, CXL 0 and CXL 1 indicate readiness stages, not completed commissioning. This slide sets the week 5 control position for the data center's mechanical MVAC scope, covering cooling, ventilation, and environmental control. Procurement visibility is not the same as installed or tested progress. The CRH units, chiller, MEU, CHW pumps, and non-LLE pipe, valve, and duct packages are listed, but their status remains at procurement control levels until the required evidence is accepted. The main week 6 gate is to approve the technical and delivery basis. That includes loads, redundancy and failure modes, hydraulic and air balance, coordinated design, access, controls, acoustics, drainage, and FAT dates. The team also needs to close the boundary between scope and interfaces, confirm technical data and vendor schedules, and release builders' work, supports, routes, and installation checks. For testing and turnover, the expectation is an approved IDP or commissioning procedure, asset tags, witness tests, punch status, TMS records, and successor release. The mechanical manager and CX manager remain accountable. No activity is complete until its inspection or test record and accepted evidence are linked to the turnover management system. This slide establishes the week 05 control position for the mechanical fuel system, covering storage, transfer, and the generator interface. The generator, load bank, and fuel tank packages are visible, and a fuel tank RFI is being prepared. However, procurement visibility at CXL0 or CXL1 is not being treated as installed, tested, or commission progress. The key control principle is that no activity is complete until its asset tag, inspection or test record, punch status, and accepted evidence are linked in the turnover management system. The main gaps are organized across 5 domains. First, the fuel oil owner and functional boundary need signed control. Design and interface information exists at different levels of maturity, so coordinated calculations, schematics, controls, and access zones are still required. Procurement must advance through approved technical data, vendor scheduling, FAT planning, and preservation. Site work needs released builders' work, supports, routes, and installation checklists. Finally, testing and turnover require an ITP or commissioning procedure, witness records, punch closure, TMS updates, and successor release. For week 06, the priority is to freeze the storage and transfer boundary, fire and environmental controls, instrumentation, authority route, and test criteria. This slide presents the week 5 control position for the electrical system, covering utility power, generation, UPS, and critical distribution. The listed packages include the MV switchboard, RMU and transformer, PTU and MSB, PDU, generator, cables, and bus duct. Procurement visibility is not the same as installed or tested progress. For week 6, the priority is to approve the single-line diagram, fault and selectivity studies, earthing strategy, utility boundary, FAT and witness requirements, and energization authority. The control table shows 5 areas requiring disciplined closure. Scope and boundaries need signed ownership, including criticality, redundancy, and failure mode criteria. Design and interfaces need coordinated calculations, schematics, controls, and access zones. Procurement must be supported by approved technical data, purchase orders, vendor schedules, FAT, witness, and preservation plans. On site, installation cannot be credited without accepted quantities and release checks. Finally, testing and turnover require asset tags, inspection and test records, punch status, commissioning procedures, and linked evidence in the turnover management system. The electrical manager and commissioning manager are accountable for maintaining this chain of evidence. This slide sets the week 05 control position for the data center's fire alarm and life safety packages. The key distinction is between procurement visibility and real project progress. ASD and fire alarm packages are listed at procurement level, but that information is retained at CXL0 and CXL1. It is not converted into installed or tested progress. No activity is complete until the evidence is linked in the turnover management system, or TMS. For week 06, the team must approve the device and zone strategy, cause and effect logic, network and power arrangements, interface matrix, and witness route. The control table shows the required gates across 5 areas. First, assign scope and boundary, then coordinated design and interfaces, approved technical data, purchase orders, vendor schedules, and FAT planning. Site release requirements for builders' work, access, supports, and routes. And finally, testing and turnover through the ITP or commissioning procedure, asset tags, witness records, punch status, and successor release. The accountable owners are the fire alarm manager and CX manager. This approach ensures that detection, ASD or VESTA, PAVA, and cause and effect work are accepted through traceable evidence, rather than assumptions based on procurement alone. This slide sets the week 05 control position for the data center firefighting system, covering water supply, suppression, and life safety interfaces. The key point is that fire pumps, pre-action systems, and hydrant packages are listed for procurement, but procurement visibility is not the same as installed, tested, or commissioned progress. No activity is complete until its asset tag, inspection or test record, punch status, and accepted evidence are linked in the turnover management system. The main control gaps are clear. The functional boundary and accountable ownership still need formal approval, while design maturity and interface closure vary across the packages. Procurement must progress through approved technical data, purchase orders, vendor schedules, FAT, and preservation. On-site, builders' work, access, supports, routes, and installation release checks must be confirmed before quantity is credited. For week 06, the required gate is to approve hydraulics, zoning, water source, supervisory signals, authority tests, and integrated scenarios. The firefighting manager and commissioning manager own this control. Testing and turnover must include the ITP or commissioning procedure, asset tagging, witnessed results, punch closure, and successor release. This slide sets the week 05 control position for the public health water scope, covering cold water tanks, transfer and booster pumps, and ductile pipe packages. The key distinction is that procurement visibility at CXL0 or CXL1 is retained as evidence of package status, but it is not treated as installed, tested, or commissioned progress. No activity is complete until the evidence is linked to the TMS, with an asset tag, inspection or test record, punch status, and acceptance. For week 06, the first requirement is to confirm the scope boundary, criticality, redundancy, and failure mode basis. Design and interface information must then be coordinated, including calculations, schematics, controls, and access zones. Procurement needs approved technical data, purchase orders, vendor schedules, FAT arrangements, and preservation requirements. On site, the team must verify builders' work, access, supports, routes, and installation release. Finally, the ITP or commissioning procedure, witness points, tagging, punch closure, and successor release must be defined. The public health manager and CX manager are accountable for driving these gates through acceptance. This slide presents the week 05 control position for the data center's public health scope, specifically drainage, rainwater, waste pipe, and the sewage treatment plant, or STP. The key distinction is that procurement visibility at CXL0 or CXL1 does not equal installed, tested, or accepted progress. No activity is complete until its asset tag, inspection or test record, punch status, and accepted evidence are linked in the turnover management system, or TMS. The main control gaps are clear. The package boundary and failure mode basis still need approval, design and interface evidence is at different maturity levels, and procurement requires approved technical data, purchase orders, vendor schedules, and FAT or witness planning. On site, builders' work, access, supports, routes, and installation release checks must be confirmed before quantity is credited. For week 06, the required acceptance gates include invert levels, gradients, access, discharge, leak testing, and authority acceptance. The public health manager and commissioning manager are accountable for driving these closures and ensuring the evidence supports testing, turnover, and successor release. This slide sets the week 05 control position for the ICT and PABX packages within the data center project. The schedules are available, so procurement visibility is retained at CXL0 and CXL1. However, that visibility must not be mistaken for installed, tested, or commissioned progress. The central control principle is that no activity is complete until its asset tag, inspection or test record, punch status, and accepted evidence are linked in the turnover management system, or TMS. The week 06 gate is therefore broader than procurement. The team must approve the ICT architecture, rooms and racks, pathways, power and cooling requirements, testing approach, and cyber boundary. That includes confirming scope ownership, criticality, redundancy, and failure mode assumptions, closing design and interface information, and validating technical data, purchase orders, vendor schedules, FAT witnessing, and preservation requirements. On site, the next evidence must cover builders' work, access, supports, routes, and installation release. For testing and turnover, the required basis includes an ITP or commissioning procedure, asset tags, witnessed results, punch status, TMS records, and successor release. Accountability sits with the ICT manager and commissioning manager. This slide sets the control position for week 5 of the data center project, focusing on the BMS and EPMS packages. The key point is that package schedules are visible, but that visibility remains at the procurement and early control levels, CXL0 and CXL1. It must not be mistaken for installed, tested, or accepted progress. Evidence, not schedule presence, is what earns progress credit. For week 6, the required gate is to approve the points, protocols, controls narratives, network boundaries, and ownership for FAT, SAT, and IST. The table shows the same principle across the full lifecycle. Scope boundaries need signatures, design interfaces need closure, procurement needs approved technical data and FAT planning, and site work needs access, supports, routes, and release checks. Testing and turnover require tagged assets, witnessed procedures, punch status, and successor release. Accountability sits with the BMS or EPMS manager and the commissioning manager. No activity is complete until its asset tag, inspection or test record, punch status, and accepted evidence are linked in the turnover management system. That creates a clear, auditable chain from package planning through commissioning. This slide establishes the week 5 control position for the CPOS, or Central Plant Optimization and Supervisory Control, package within the data center project. The key point is that no direct week 5 package record has been established. Procurement visibility may exist at the CXL0 or CXL1 level, but that visibility cannot be treated as installed, tested, or accepted progress. For week 6, the project needs to assign ownership and define the operating concept, interfaces, acceptance criteria, and required dates. The table organizes that work across 5 gates: scope and boundaries, design and interfaces, procurement and factory acceptance testing, site installation, and testing and turnover. Each gate requires specific evidence before progress can be credited. The control principle is straightforward. No activity is complete until its asset tag, inspection or test record, punch status, and accepted evidence are linked in the turnover management system. Accountability sits with the controls manager and commissioning manager. The terminology also needs confirmation, particularly the relationship between CPOS, BMS, and EPMS, while CX refers to commissioning. This slide sets the control position for the water leak detection, or WLD, package at week 5. WLD appears in the mechanical non-LLE package register, which gives us procurement visibility, but that visibility must not be mistaken for installed, tested, or commissioned progress. The key principle is that no activity is complete until its asset tag, inspection or test record, punch status, and accepted evidence are linked in the turnover management system. For week 6, the team needs to move from registration toward controlled execution. That means approving the system zones, cable routing, cause and effect logic, BMS and EPMS interfaces, and the coverage required for functional testing. The table shows the gates across the full delivery chain. First, confirm scope, boundary, criticality, redundancy, and failure modes. Then close the design interfaces, approve technical data and the vendor schedule, and establish FAT and witness requirements. On site, builders' work, access, supports, routes, and installation release checks must be ready. Finally, testing and turnover require an approved procedure, tagged assets, witnessed results, punch management, and successor release. Responsibility sits with the controls or WLD manager and the commissioning manager. This slide sets the week 5 control position for the elevator system, covering passenger, service, freight, and firefighter operation. The key point is that long lead packages are visible in procurement, but procurement visibility is not installed or tested progress. At this stage, the owner and functional boundaries still need formal sign-off, while design interfaces, calculations, controls, access zones, and failure mode requirements remain at different levels of maturity. For week 6, the next gates are clear. The team needs to approve shaft, pit, and headroom requirements, power supplies, fire recall, rescue provisions, certification, access, and replacement routes. Procurement must move toward approved technical data, purchase orders, vendor scheduling, FAT arrangements, and preservation requirements. On site, builders' work, supports, routes, and installation release checks must be established before quantity is credited. Finally, testing and turnover require an ITP or commissioning procedure, asset tags, witnessed results, punch status, a turnover record, and successor release. The vertical transport manager and commissioning manager are accountable. Nothing is complete until the evidence is linked to the turnover management system. This slide establishes the week 05 control position for the EOT crane, covering plant lifting, runway, safety, and load certification. The key point is that no direct week 05 package record has been established, so procurement visibility at CXL0 and CXL1 must not be treated as installed, tested, or commissioned progress. For week 06, the team needs to convert the package into clear acceptance gates. That begins with confirming the crane's owner, functional boundary, criticality, redundancy, and failure mode basis. The design must then be coordinated, including calculations, schematics, controls, interfaces, and access zones. Procurement evidence should include approved technical data, the purchase order, the vendor schedule, FAT and witness requirements, and preservation controls. On site, the required evidence includes builder's work, supports and routes, access, and an installation release checklist. Testing and turnover require an ITP or commissioning procedure, asset tags, witness records, punch closure, TMS evidence, and successor release. Accountability sits with the EOT or Special Lifting Systems Manager, Structural Lead, and CX Manager. Completion depends on structural acceptance, inspection and test records, a proof load certificate, and linked turnover evidence. This slide presents the week 05 control position for the BMU and monorail package, covering facade access, fall protection, and rescue. The central message is that procurement visibility exists at CXL0 and CXL1, but that visibility must not be treated as installed, tested, or commissioned progress. No direct week 05 package record is established for the BMU. The week 06 objective is to establish clear acceptance gates across the full delivery chain. That begins with a signed scope boundary, defined criticality, redundancy, and failure mode basis. Design and interface information must then be coordinated, including calculations, schematics, controls, and access zones. Procurement needs approved technical data, a purchase order, vendor schedule, FAT and witness requirements, and preservation controls. On site, the team must verify builder's work, supports, routes, and installation release before crediting progress. Testing and turnover require an ITP or commissioning procedure, asset tags, witness tests, punch closure, TMS evidence, and successor release. Accountability sits with the BMU or Facade Access Package Manager, Structural Lead, HSE, and Commissioning Manager. Completion depends on tagged coverage, anchor or rail acceptance, proof load certificates, rescue demonstration, and linked turnover evidence. This slide sets the control position for the security systems package, covering both internal and external protection. The key point is that procurement evidence is visible, but it is retained at CXL0 and CXL1. It must not be treated as installed, tested, or commissioned progress. For week 06, the required gate is much broader. The team needs approved device coverage, door and system interfaces, network and storage requirements, the cyber boundary, and defined FAT, SAT, and IST scenarios. The table then organizes acceptance across 5 control domains. Scope needs a signed boundary, criticality, redundancy, and failure mode basis. Design requires coordinated drawings, calculations, controls, and access zones. Procurement must include approved technical data, purchase orders, vendor scheduling, FAT witnessing, and preservation. Site work needs confirmed builder's work, routes, supports, and an installation release checklist. Finally, testing and turnover require an ITP or commissioning procedure, asset tags, witnesses, punch status, TMS records, and successor release. The most important control principle is simple. No activity is complete until its asset tag, inspection or test record, punch status, and accepted evidence are linked in the turnover management system. The Security Systems Manager and CX Manager own this control. This slide sets out the week 05 commissioning position for the data center project. Testing and commissioning sits within MEP delivery, while while the client and commissioning advisor provide independent acceptance oversight. The immediate focus is not to claim progress prematurely, but to establish clear boundaries, asset hierarchy, acceptance criteria, witness authority, installation release requirements, and turnover structure. The governing principle is that no system advances on narrative alone. Each step must be supported by linked, accepted, and tagged evidence tied to the integrated program. At CXL 0, package lists exist, but ownership, boundaries, criticality, and asset hierarchy still require acceptance. CXL 1 has selected procurement records, with design, vendor data, purchase orders, FAT requirements, and need dates forming the next gate. Both levels are amber. CXL 2 through CXL 6 remain open or not reached, covering factory release, installation, startup, functional and integrated testing, and final turnover. For week 06, the priority is to convert each system into a controlled evidence trail, including inspections, checklists, witness tests, punch items, training, operations and maintenance information, spares, as-builts, and the turnover management system. This slide sets the evidence closure plan and next cycle commitments for week 5, with a clear focus on turning open actions into verified releases. 5 activities are marked critical. First, the team must obtain official permissions and resolve PLN, gas, and access constraints, supported by permits, continuity records, as-built, testing, and access release. Before the test pile, construction and HSE teams must sign off the survey, live services, excavation, platform, plant, and method releases through one integrated checklist. Before week 6, the design manager must issue the aging of CSA and MEP need dates, together with current revisions, reviewer records, transmittals, and a recovery forecast. MEP, procurement, and commissioning must also reconcile every long lead and non-long lead package against technical, purchase order, FAT, and need dates. The remaining open item covers plant, HSE, logistics, trial mix, and rebar dossiers before use or production. The governing rule is simple. Every action needs one accountable owner, a need date, a predecessor, objective evidence, a verifier, and an explicit closure or carry-forward status. This week's HSE record shows a positive lagging result. 0 incidents across 64 days and 31,670 cumulative man-hours. That result needs to be understood in context, because exposure is increasing. The project now has 121 field workers, supported by 5 construction supervisors and 3 safety supervisors, with 60 core or joint operations workers and 61 subcontractor workers. Leading activity is also being recorded. 15 induction sessions reaching 135 people, 51 Toolbox talks, 1 safety training session for 22 people, and 14 equipment or pre-start inspections. These figures indicate active control, but the growing workforce and plant increased demand around permits, supervision, line-of-fire risks, and timely closeout. The required action for week 06 is therefore to issue a workfront-based leading control dashboard and verify corrective actions in the same cycle. The HSE manager owns this control, due before week 06, under record W05-01. Acceptance should connect permits, briefings, inspections, observations, and closeout, with every item supported by an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified completion. This control record turns the environmental program from a calendar into something that can be verified. The program covers the full range of expected controls, including noise, dust, water and air quality, washing bay sludge, spill response, audits, hazardous waste, drainage filtration, housekeeping, plant emissions, and waste segregation. The key issue is that a planned activity by itself does not demonstrate that monitoring or corrective action actually occurred at the current workfront. The project therefore needs a legal and permit register, define monitoring locations, frequencies, result limits, and evidence that issues were closed. Acceptance depends on objective, current, and verified records. For week 06, the environmental manager must record what was completed, the result, who verified it, and how any corrective action was closed. That includes checking drainage before discharge and after rainfall, linking plant testing to the equipment register, maintaining licensed waste manifests, and scoring housekeeping by workfront. The record should also identify accountable owners and the applicable due date. In short, the calendar shows intent. The control record proves performance. This control record focuses on occupational health coverage for 194 personnel during week 05, with verification required before week 06. The key point is that having a program in place does not, by itself, confirm that facilities have enough capacity, that every shift is covered, or that medical response is ready. The requirement is to verify current conditions with objective records. The HSE and medical lead are responsible for checking welfare capacity, emergency medical arrangements, first aid and nursing provision, exposure monitoring, inspections, hygiene controls, and training. The review also needs to cover communicable disease controls, fogging procedures, accommodation hygiene, site toilets, area sterilization, and MSDS training by exposure group. For environmental monitoring, the record should identify locations, limits, results, and any required actions for temperature, humidity, dust, and noise. Medical readiness should include the hospital route, contact details, and evidence of a drill. Before week 06, the project must issue a current occupational health compliance and capacity record. Acceptance depends on an accountable owner, a clear data date, objective evidence, and verified closeout for any gaps. This week's control record focuses on site readiness and the conditions required before the test pile. The overall picture is positive. Site clearing and access, temporary water, genset power, grounding, the washing bay, containers and board pile plant, manpower, and rigging mobilization are reported complete. However, several important items remain in progress. These include utility power, site office works, electrical utility relocation, rebar delivery and fabrication, the concrete trial mix, and rebar testing. The asterisk on site clearing and access is a reminder that completion labels alone are not enough. We still need measured quantities, inspection evidence, and confirmation that permissions, live utilities, and usable access are actually available. The project manager's decision is to approve one workfront readiness matrix with quantities, inspections, constraints, and successor gates clearly recorded. The construction manager owns this action and must complete it before the test pile. For week 06, the required control is to sign off the permit, utility, access, platform, plant, and quality releases. Acceptance requires an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified closeout. This week's control record focuses on resource mobilization, with one central question: are we matching available capacity to safe, productive work fronts? The register records 194 personnel mobilized, 73 core and project personnel, plus 121 field and subcontract personnel. The core group includes permanent staff, contract staff, main contractor support, security, and expatriate personnel. The field total is distributed across temporary electrical power, early works, site office support, safety, and the board pile workforce, which is the largest listed package. The headcount alone is not evidence of productivity. Without confirmed shifts, competence, supervision, and workfront allocation, additional personnel can create idle cost or unsafe congestion. The required action is therefore to issue a role, shift, and workfront loading plan, supported by competence information and measured productivity. The construction manager owns this action, and it is due before week 06. The week 06 control must reconcile attendance, competency, supervision, and productive hours using current, objective records with an accountable owner and verified closeout. The separate utility relocation crew remains recorded as 0 and must be tracked separately. This slide records the week 05 governance control for the data center project. The structure separates head office governance from site office delivery, with the project steering committee and project director providing direction, supported by business, engineering, MEP, and data center specialists. On site, the project manager leads delivery alongside HSE, QA/QC, commercial and engineering, MEP, architecture, civil, and structural management. The key point is that a role-only organization chart is not enough. It shows who is involved, but it does not confirm who can make decisions, who covers an absent leader, how quickly issues must be escalated, or when decisions are expected. The required control is a formally approved RACI, Delegated Authority Matrix, deputy coverage arrangement, and escalation protocol. The project director owns this action, with completion required before week 06. The week 06 control record must be signed and include an accountable owner, the current data date, an objective record, and verified closeout. This converts the governance structure from a diagram into an operational decision framework that can be checked and enforced. This slide records the week 05 project control requirement for an integrated delivery organization. The central issue is not simply having the right functions represented. It is making sure those functions operate through one control rhythm, with clear ownership and documented decisions. The organization connects head office governance with the site office and the integrated delivery team. At the top are the steering committee, project director, business support, engineering, and MEP management, along with data center technical specialists. On site, the project manager coordinates HSE, quality, administration, and the accountable functional leads. Those leads cover project controls and assurance, design and engineering, MEP delivery and commissioning, and architecture, civil works, plant, and logistics. The risk identified is that parallel instructions or unclear acceptance authority could fragment design and field release. The required action is therefore to publish one meeting cadence, one package ownership matrix, a controlled document route, and a clear interface escalation path. Before week 06, the project manager must issue the integrated organization, RACI, and meeting cadence, with each acceptance tied to an accountable owner, current data, an objective record, and verified closeout. This slide records week 05 control for plant mobilization on the data center project. The register identifies approximately 20 main contractor units, 30 specialist units, and one mechanical and electrical tool lot, for a combined total of 50 units plus one lot. The equipment ranges from office containers, toilets, survey tools, and generators to board pile rigs, crawler cranes, excavators, slurry silos, and rebar equipment. The key control point is that physical presence does not prove readiness for use. An asset must have registration, current certification, a completed pre-start inspection, a competent operator, and a defined workfront allocation. Those records also need to support ground suitability, maintenance status, and productive utilization. The project manager's decision is therefore to release every asset through documented evidence, with the plant manager accountable and completion required before use. For week 06, the control record must be completed with an accountable owner, a current data date, objective supporting records, and verified closeout. This turns the plant register from a simple inventory into an active control over safe, compliant, and productive mobilization. This week's control record shows that CSA engineering activity is moving, but volume alone is not evidence of readiness in the field. The record includes 11 material approval requests, 35 shop drawings, 2 work method statements, and 19 RFIs. Of those, 30 recorded replies are shown against 67 total submissions, with particular attention needed for concrete, board pile, and other workfront critical items. The central concern is need date aging. A submission may have a reply, yet the current accepted revision may not have reached the affected workfront before the date it was needed. The required control is a daily aging and revision matrix, supported by controlled transmittals. For week 06, the design manager owns this action, due before the week begins. The matrix should connect each item to its revision, reviewer, need date, disposition, and field release. Closeout should only be accepted when there is a named owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified evidence that the action is complete. That approach turns the record from a list of counts into an active recovery and escalation tool. This week 05 control record focuses on the MEP engineering position and the actions required before week 06. The current record shows 54 material approval request submissions, but only 5 recorded replies, 3 approvals, and 2 resubmissions. That leaves the technical release position incomplete and highlights the need to track aging against actual procurement and construction need dates. Other controls are less mature. Shop drawings are waiting for upstream information. No accepted status is shown for work method statements, and a fuel tank RFI is still being prepared. At this stage, the project remains in early design and procurement, with no installed progress credit recorded. The key project risk is that procurement could move ahead of coordinated design, creating rework, interface problems, and long lead exposure. The required PM decision is to freeze the MEP deliverable register, including need dates, interface priorities, accountable owners, and current data dates. Before week 06, the MEP design manager must close the drawing, method, RFI, BAM, and technical approval gates, with each item supported by an objective record and verified closeout. This control record addresses quality control for the trial mix and concrete crushing program. The central requirement is one approved concrete dossier that connects the entire evidence chain, from the mix and production batch, through sample identification, equipment calibration, witnessing, test results, and formal disposition. The register covers multiple concrete grades, trial dates, and 7-, 14-, and 28-day crushing milestones across the supplier roles shown here. However, the record is not yet fully reconciled. Some results are current, while others are future dated, so the project team must not treat every listed milestone as evidence of acceptance. The project impact is significant. If batch and sample identities, acceptance limits, or dates cannot be verified, production could be released prematurely. The project manager's decision is therefore to hold acceptance to a single traceable dossier, owned by the QA/QC manager, and due before production. In week 06, the team must complete the accepted concrete and rebar dossier. Closeout requires a named accountable owner, a current data date, objective supporting records, and verified resolution of every outstanding item. This control record focuses on the week 05 2-week look ahead, with a clear message. Release logic must govern the piling sequence. The September 2nd forecast brings together early works, engineering, procurement, and near-term piling activities, but those activities cannot be treated as independent tasks. Their release depends on the status of permits, live utility relocation, and access conditions. The project risk is straightforward. If official permission is not in place, utilities have not been safely relocated, or access remains obstructed, the planned piling start may be invalid, and resequencing could create unsafe conditions. The required project manager decision is therefore to approve one logic-linked forecast, supported by permit, utility, and access milestones, defined quantities, recovery actions, and assigned release decision. Before week 06, the planning manager must issue the accepted look-ahead and the constraint recovery register. Acceptance requires an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective supporting record, and verified closeout. This creates a single, traceable control position for the next reporting period, rather than allowing disconnected forecasts or informal releases to drive the work. This slide focuses on the week 05 control record for CSA procurement, with one central objective: link every material release to the construction need date. The package register gives us a current view of procurement activities and milestones, but it should not be treated as proof of readiness on its own. For each material or package, I need to reconcile the full chain of evidence: design release, purchase order, manufacturing status, inspection, delivery, storage, and the date the workfront actually needs the item. That reconciliation is owned by the procurement manager and is due before week 06. The key project control concern is that schedule graphics can appear healthy even when technical data, purchase evidence, inspection records, or delivery confirmation are still missing. For week 06, the required action is to issue package gate dates supported by objective evidence. Each accepted item must have an accountable owner, a current data date, a verifiable record, and confirmed closeout. The supplier groupings shown here should therefore be managed against that same evidence-based standard. This slide records week 05 control for continued CSA procurement, with the focus on protecting production, logistics, and acceptance. The second procurement record extends the CSA package and gives the team a clearer milestone view across Supplier A, Supplier B, and Supplier C. The key project risk is that late technical decisions, delivery issues, or delayed acceptance could interrupt piling and the structural work that follows. To reduce that risk, The project manager is requiring procurement and QA/QC to publish supplier role milestones, delivery lots, inspection points, preservation dates, and contingency dates before week 06. The week 06 control must connect each supply lot to the inspection and test plan, or ITP, and to the actual program demand. Acceptance is not simply a status update. It needs an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified closeout. The immediate action is to issue this control record before week 06, so procurement progress can be tested against both quality requirements and the construction sequence. This creates a reliable basis for managing the CSA package and preventing supply or acceptance gaps from affecting successor work. This slide records the week 05 control position for the MEP long lead procurement register. The register covers critical packages including lifts, PDUs, MUs, CROS chillers, medium voltage switchgear, RMUs and transformers, pumps, PTUs and MSBs, generators, and load banks. The key point is that visibility alone does not equal progress. A package is not considered controlled simply because it appears on a list. We need evidence at each gate, confirm system and package ownership, design freeze, purchase order, vendor data status, FAT or witness requirements, and a delivery date aligned with the integrated program. The required outcome is protected need dates supported by objective records. Before week 06, the MEP, procurement, and commissioning teams must issue the signed long lead equipment gate register. Each entry should have an accountable owner, a current data date, a clear supporting record, and verified closeout. The supplier placeholders shown here indicate that responsibility and package status still need to be tied to specific, controlled records. This is the project manager's required action for converting procurement visibility into dependable program control. This slide records the week 05 control position for MEP non-long lead procurement. The register covers a broad set of packages, including cables and trays, fuel tanks, grounding, bus duct, lighting, low-voltage boards, piping, valves, ductwork, FCUs, WLD, and related works. The important issue is that listing these packages alone does not prove they are ready to support the project. Each package must be connected to the complete delivery path. That means defining its system boundary, confirming the coordinated design, establishing release criteria, and identifying the inspection and commissioning route. Without those links, separate package schedules can easily overlook builders' work, access requirements, testing, or controls interfaces. My required action for week 06 is for the MEP manager to issue a coordinated non-LLE system and package matrix. Every entry needs an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective supporting record, and verified closeout. This turns the register from a list of procurement items into a practical project control tool, with clear accountability across the relevant suppliers and interfaces. This control record focuses on non-long lead MEP procurement and, more importantly, on establishing integrated acceptance across life safety, public health, and digital systems. The register includes fire alarm and ASD, pumps, pre-action and hydrant systems, tanks, pumps and drainage, BMS and EPMS, ICT, security, and PABX packages. The key risk is not simply whether each package is procured. It is whether the interfaces between packages are clearly defined before integrated testing begins. If ownership, points, cause and effect logic, or authority routes remain unclear, failures may only become visible during FAT, SAT, or IST, when correction is more disruptive. The required project manager decision is to approve the interface matrices, the FAT, SAT, and IST strategy, and the authority and witness responsibilities for each system. The MEP and commissioning manager owns this action, with completion required before week 06. The week 06 control is to connect digital and life safety packages to objective integrated test evidence. Acceptance requires an accountable owner, a current data date, a verifiable record, and confirmed closeout. The immediate priority is to freeze these responsibilities before testing starts. This control record focuses on the critical permission, utility, and access constraints identified in week 05. The central concern is that several activities are progressing without complete, documented acceptance. Underground clearance remains incomplete, Electrical relocation is targeted for September 8th. Gas relocation has not started, and permission for the test pile is only verbal. 2 water pipe elevation issues have been addressed locally through pile cap changes, but those changes still require formal structural and authority confirmation. The project impact is significant. No main activity should be released until every authority and technical gate is accepted and recorded. Unverified conditions could stop the work, damage live services, or transfer unresolved risk into the permanent works. For week 06, I would escalate one signed constraint register, with the project manager as owner and immediate action required. Acceptance must include a responsible owner, current data, objective evidence, and verified closeout. That means an official utilities and access plan, a written permit for the exact work front, approved structural revisions, and a permit to dig with trial holes, authority attendance, and signed clearance before test pile excavation proceeds. This creates one controlled record for release decisions. This week's control record focuses on utility interfaces and the immediate risk they create for the project. Electrical cable relocation is progressing, but the third target is now September 8th, following earlier target dates on August 9th, August 15th, and August 28th. By contrast, the gas line relocation is reported as having no activity, which requires direct control rather than assumption. The key project impact is that repeated slippage can compromise safe excavation, site access, the piling sequence, and service continuity. The required management response is to agree authority-owned milestones, maintain a daily forecast, and confirm the outage and continuity plan. The team also needs verified survey, testing, and reinstatement acceptance, with the interface manager accountable for daily control through September 8th. For week 06, the signed utility constraint and recovery register must be issued. Each item needs an accountable owner, a current data date, objective evidence, and verified closeout. That applies to the blocked access route as well. It must either be removed or replaced with an approved alternative and inspected. No successor activity should be released from visible progress alone. Permits, continuity, as-built information, testing, and accepted closeout are all required. This control record focuses on the early works site facilities and the approval of the controlled logistics layout. The layout identifies the key operational zones, including the gate, washing bay, induction and clinic area, temporary electrical, fuel and storage areas, plant and stores, welfare facilities, the specialist office and HSE point, and the piling and silo zones. The project impact is significant. If these facilities are not coordinated, they can obstruct emergency access, conflict with utilities, create risks around hazardous storage, disrupt deliveries, and interfere with piling logistics. The PM decision is to approve the surveyed locations, capacities, separation distances, traffic routes, emergency access, and operating handover. Construction and HSE own this action, with completion required before week 06. The week 06 control is to issue the approved site logistics drawing and begin daily inspections. Acceptance must be supported by an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified closeout. This creates a clear, auditable transition from planning the facilities to controlling them in daily site operations. This slide records the week 05 control position for the proposed site office on the data center project. The focus is not simply the room layout. It is whether the office can support coordination, welfare, emergency response, specialist interfaces, and controlled project records. The key decision is to validate the office before week 06. That validation needs to cover room functions and occupancy, along with power, fire, IT, welfare services, evacuation arrangements, and the criteria for handover. From a project control perspective, any gap in these areas could weaken supervision and reduce operational readiness. The construction and HSE functions are identified as the accountable owners, with the action due before week 06. The required next step is to issue a site office readiness and operating checklist. For acceptance, each item must have a clear owner, a current data date, an objective supporting record, and verified closeout. This creates an auditable control record rather than an informal approval. The specialist office and HSE point, together with the specialist silo area, should therefore be reflected in the final operating arrangement and review. This week's control record focuses on Phase 1 site logistics, and the goal is to make the plan ready for release rather than leaving it as a general arrangement. I'm looking at the practical interfaces: access routes, delivery and lifting paths, pedestrian movement, fabrication and laydown areas, temporary power and fuel, welfare, waste, drainage, water points, security, and emergency access. The key risk is route conflict. When pedestrians, deliveries, lifting operations, fabrication, and live services overlap, the potential for line-of-fire exposure and restricted emergency response increases significantly. The project manager's decision is therefore to freeze the Phase 1 logistics plan using surveyed routes, confirmed capacities, drainage information, and daily change control. This gives the team a current, objective basis for managing the site. Before Phase 1 is released, the construction manager must own the action and close it through Control Record W05-22. For Week 06, acceptance requires clearly segregated routes and defined workfront boundaries, supported by an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified closeout. This control record highlights a critical site condition during Week 05. Early works are active, but the access route remains unusable because of an obstruction. The immediate priority is to restore a safe, dependable route to site. This is more than a logistics inconvenience. Restricted access can affect emergency response, movement of plant and equipment, deliveries, and the planned piling sequence. Until the route is confirmed usable, these activities remain exposed to disruption and uncertainty. The required project management decision is clear. Construction and logistics must issue a dated obstruction removal plan, identify an alternative route, define traffic control measures, and arrange an acceptance inspection. Each step needs an accountable owner and objective evidence of completion. For Week 06, the control point is verification, not assumption. The team must confirm that access is usable and that emergency route continuity is maintained. Closeout should be supported by current information, a clear data date, an objective record, and verified acceptance. The due status is immediate, and the control record is W05-23. This slide records a critical site access issue identified during Week 05. Early works are active, but the access route remains unusable because of an obstruction. That is more than a logistics inconvenience. Restricted access can affect emergency response, plant movement, deliveries, and the planned piling sequence. The required recovery decision is to establish a clear, dated path back to usable access. Construction and logistics are responsible for issuing an obstruction removal plan, an alternative route, traffic control arrangements, and an acceptance inspection. The word dated matters here because the project team needs a specific recovery sequence rather than a general intention to resolve the problem. For Week 06, the control is straightforward. Verify that access is usable and that emergency route continuity is maintained. Closeout should be supported by an accountable owner, the current data date, an objective record, and verified evidence that the issue has been resolved. This control record, W05-24, is due immediately and should remain visible until acceptance is complete. This control record focuses on converting a Toolbox briefing into verified field behavior, not simply documenting that a meeting took place. The record shows a briefing held at the site office or workfront assembly area, with the HSE manager accountable for the control on every shift. Attendance alone does not confirm understanding. It does not demonstrate that workers can apply the exact controls for the task, permit conditions, live services, lifting activities, or line-of-fire exposures. The project manager's required response is therefore practical and evidence-based. The briefing should address task-specific hazards, use questions to test understanding, and include supervisor verification at the workfront. Same-shift observations then confirm whether the expected behavior is actually being followed. For Week 06, the control is to connect the briefing, attendance, permit, and observation closeout into one traceable record. Acceptance requires 4 things: an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified closeout. This makes the Toolbox talk a leading HSE control, rather than an administrative sign-in exercise, and gives the project a reliable basis for deciding whether the control is working. This control record focuses on converting a Toolbox briefing from a routine attendance event into verified field behavior. The record shows that a briefing took place at the site office or workfront assembly area, but attendance alone does not prove that workers understood the controls for the exact task. That includes task-specific hazards, permits, live services, lifting activities, and line-of-fire exposure. The key control is verification, not simply participation. The project manager's required action is to use task-specific questions, obtain supervisor verification, and complete same-shift observations that confirm the briefing has been understood and applied in the field. For week 06, the process must connect the briefing, attendance record, permit, and observation closeout. Acceptance depends on 4 things: an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified closeout. The HSE manager owns this control, and it is due each shift under Control Record W05-26. This approach creates a clear link between what was discussed, what was authorized, what was observed, and what still requires action. This slide records a Week 5 HSE leading control, focused on turning a Toolbox briefing into verified field behavior. The briefing took place at the site office and workfront assembly area, but attendance by itself is not enough to demonstrate understanding. The key control is verification against the actual task. That means discussing task-specific hazards, the relevant permit, live service conditions, lifting risks, and line-of-fire exposures, rather than relying on a generic briefing. The project manager's decision is to strengthen the record with targeted questions, supervisor verification, and observations completed during the same shift. These checks create evidence that workers understood the controls and applied them in the field, not simply that they were present when the briefing occurred. For week 6, the process should connect the briefing, attendance record, permit, and observation closeout into one traceable control chain. Acceptance requires 4 things: an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified closeout. The HSE manager owns this control. It is due every shift, and the reference control record is W05-27. This is how a short briefing becomes a measurable project control. This control record focuses on Toolbox Talk 4 of 6, and its purpose is to convert a briefing into verified field behavior. The record shows that a Toolbox briefing took place at the site office and workfront assembly area. The key issue is that attendance alone does not demonstrate understanding of the exact work being performed. It does not, by itself, confirm that people understand task-specific hazards, permit requirements, live service risks, lifting controls, or line-of-fire exposures. The project manager's decision is therefore to strengthen the control, not simply repeat the briefing. Each shift should include task-specific hazards, targeted questions, supervisor verification, and same-shift observations that confirm the controls are actually being applied. Verification in the field is the leading control. For week 06, the briefing must be linked to attendance, the applicable permit, and observation closeout. Acceptance requires an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified closeout. The HSE manager owns this control, due each shift, under Control Record W05-28. This control record focuses on converting a Toolbox briefing from a scheduled activity into verified field behavior. The record shows that a briefing took place at the site office or workfront assembly area, but attendance by itself does not prove that workers understood the exact task or its controls. The key control is verification, not attendance alone. The project manager's direction is to use task-specific hazards and questions, then require supervisor verification and same-shift observations. This approach checks whether the briefing has actually influenced behavior around permits, live services, lifting activities, and line-of-fire risks. It also creates an objective record that can be reviewed, rather than relying on a sign-in sheet or verbal assurance. For week 06, the control needs to connect the briefing, attendance, permit, and observation closeout. Acceptance depends on 4 things: an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified closeout. The HSE manager owns this control. It is due each shift, and the control record is W05-29. The practical message is simple: brief the team, test understanding, observe the work, and close the loop. This control record focuses on the final toolbox talk in the 6-part sequence, and on whether the briefing is converted into verified field behavior. The record shows that a toolbox briefing took place at the site office or workfront assembly area. However, attendance alone does not confirm understanding of the exact task or its controls. That includes permit requirements, live services, lifting activities, and line-of-fire hazards. The project manager's decision is therefore to strengthen the control, not simply collect signatures. Each shift should use task-specific hazards, focused questions, supervisor verification, and same-shift observations to confirm that the briefing is understood and applied in the field. This turns the briefing from an administrative event into an active HSE leading control. For week 06, the HSE manager owns the action, with a due point of every shift under control record W05-30. The briefing, attendance, permit, and observation closeout must be linked. Acceptance requires an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified closeout. That is the evidence needed to demonstrate performance, rather than assuming it. This control record focuses on fogging activities and the occupational health evidence required to manage them safely. The key issue is not simply whether fogging occurred, but whether each application can be demonstrated as controlled, properly documented, and safe for people who may re-enter the area. The required record must identify the product and current MSDS, the competent operator, the treated area, dosage, weather and ventilation conditions, the exclusion period, and the approved re-entry time. The project manager's assessment is that fogging has been recorded across both site and site office areas, but incomplete coverage, chemical exposure, or uncontrolled re-entry could still create health risks without proving sustained hygiene performance. The decision is therefore to make this information part of the formal control process at every application, with the HSE or medical lead accountable for ownership and closeout. By week 06, the team must issue an application and re-entry acceptance record. That record needs a named owner, a current data date, objective supporting evidence, and verified closeout. This control is tracked under W05-31 and is due at each application. This control record focuses on fogging activities and the occupational health evidence needed to manage them safely. The key issue is not simply whether fogging occurred, but whether each application was controlled, documented, and followed by a verified re-entry decision. Every application needs a complete control record. That includes the product and current MSDS, the competent operator, the treated area, dosage, weather and ventilation conditions, the exclusion period, and the approved re-entry time. The project manager's assessment is that fogging is being recorded across both site and site office areas, supporting the broader occupational health controls. However, incomplete coverage, chemical exposure, or uncontrolled re-entry could create a health risk and would not demonstrate sustained hygiene performance. The required action is to maintain objective, current records with clear accountability. For week 06, the HSE or medical lead owns the control, and it is due at each application. The application and re-entry acceptance record must identify the accountable owner, carry the current data date, include objective evidence, and show verified closeout. This control is tracked under record W05-32. This control record addresses fogging activity as an occupational health measure during week 05 of the data center project. The focus is not simply confirming that fogging occurred. It is proving that each application was controlled, documented, and safe for people who may re-enter the area. The required record should identify the product and current MSDS, the competent operator, the treated area, dosage, weather and ventilation conditions, the exclusion period, and the authorized re-entry time. These details establish both accountability and a traceable basis for assessing the work. The performance concern is that chemical exposure, incomplete coverage, or uncontrolled re-entry can create a health risk without demonstrating sustained hygiene performance across site and site office areas. The project manager's decision is to require this information at every application, with HSE or the medical lead as the accountable owner. Week 06 must include the application and reentry acceptance record. Acceptance requires an accountable owner, a current date, an objective record, and verified closeout. This control is tracked under W05-33 and is due at each application. This control record addresses fogging activities as an occupational health requirement during week 05. The purpose is not simply to confirm that fogging occurred, but to demonstrate that it was planned, controlled, and safely closed out across both site and site office areas. The key control is to capture the product and current MSDS, identify the competent operator, and record the specific area treated. The record should also include dosage, weather and ventilation conditions, the exclusion period, and the authorized reentry time. Safe reentry must be evidenced, not assumed. From a project management perspective, incomplete coverage, chemical exposure, or uncontrolled access could create a health risk while leaving no reliable proof of sustained hygiene performance. The HSE or medical lead owns this control, and it is due at every application, under Control Record W05-34. For week 06, the required action is to issue an application and reentry acceptance record. That record needs an accountable owner, a current date, objective supporting information, and verified closeout. Together, these requirements turn a routine fogging activity into a traceable, auditable control. This control record addresses occupational health controls for fogging activities during week 05. The purpose is not simply to confirm that fogging occurred, but to demonstrate that each application was planned, documented, and safely controlled across both site and site office areas. The key requirement is a complete application and reentry record. That record should identify the product and current MSDS, the competent operator, the treated area, dosage, weather and ventilation conditions, as well as the exclusion period and approved reentry time. These details create an objective trail and help prevent chemical exposure, incomplete coverage, or people returning to an area before it is safe. The HSE or medical lead owns this control, and it is due at each application. For week 06, the project manager is directing the team to issue the application and reentry acceptance record, with an accountable owner, current date, objective evidence, and verified closeout. This is recorded as Control W05-35, and completion should be checked as part of the next control cycle. This control record addresses fogging activity as part of the project's occupational health controls during week 05. The focus is not simply whether fogging occurred, but whether each application can be demonstrated as controlled, suitable, and safe for reentry. The required record is the evidence of control. It should identify the product and current MSDS, the competent operator, the treated area, dosage, weather and ventilation conditions, the exclusion period, and the approved reentry time. This applies across both site and site office areas. Without complete information, chemical exposure, incomplete coverage, or uncontrolled reentry could create a health risk, while also making it difficult to prove sustained hygiene performance. The HSE or medical lead owns this action, and it is due at every application, not just at the end of the week. For week 06, the required follow-up is an application and reentry acceptance record. That record must have an accountable owner, a current date, objective supporting information, and verified closeout. This provides a clear basis for the project manager to confirm that the control was completed and remains auditable. This control record addresses fogging activity as an occupational health measure during week 05. The objective is not simply to confirm that fogging occurred, but to demonstrate that each application was controlled, traceable, and safe for people returning to the area. The required record should identify the product and current MSDS, the competent operator, the treated area, dosage, weather and ventilation conditions, plus the exclusion period and the approved reentry time. The critical control is proving both safe exposure management and sustained hygiene performance. From the project manager's perspective, incomplete coverage, chemical exposure, or uncontrolled reentry creates a health risk and weakens the evidence supporting the activity. Responsibility sits with the HSE or medical lead, and the record is due at every application, under Control Record W05-37. For week 06, the team must issue the application and reentry acceptance record. That acceptance needs an accountable owner, a current date, an objective supporting record, and verified closeout. In practical terms, each fogging event should be treated as a controlled activity with clear evidence from preparation through final reentry approval. This control record covers the wash bay and environmental handover for week 05 as part of the site facilities review. The record supports piling mobilization by confirming that key facilities are being prepared, including access, drainage, offices and welfare areas, and rebar fabrication zones. The important distinction is that a facility is not ready simply because it is physically present. It must also have adequate capacity, effective drainage, proper segregation, a completed inspection, and a clearly accountable operator. No facility should be relied on before those conditions are accepted. The project manager's required action is therefore specific. Inspect the individual facility, document any defects, and formally release it to the responsible operator. This places ownership with construction and HSE, with completion required before use. In week 06, the control is to issue a facility inspection, handover, and operating record. Acceptance must show an accountable owner, a current date, objective evidence, and verified closeout of any issues. The relevant control record is W05-38. This control record addresses site facilities supporting piling mobilization, with a focus on pedestrian access and temporary drainage. The evidence is part of a broader preparation record that also includes office and welfare facilities, along with rebar fabrication areas. The key point is that simply having a facility in place does not make it ready for reliance. Capacity, drainage, segregation, inspection, and operating responsibility all need to be confirmed. The project manager's decision is therefore clear. Inspect the specific facility, record any defects, and formally release it to an accountable operator before use. For week 06, construction and HSE must issue the facility inspection, handover, and operating record before the facility is used. Acceptance must include 4 elements: an accountable owner, a current date, an objective record, and verified closeout of any identified issues. This moves the project from visual presence to controlled readiness, and creates a traceable basis for safe operation under control record W05-39. The immediate priority is acceptance before reliance, not assumption based on appearance alone. This control record addresses site facility readiness during week 5, with particular relevance to piling mobilization and the preparation of access, drainage, offices, welfare areas, and rebar fabrication spaces. The key point is that a facility is not ready simply because it exists on site. Readiness requires verified capacity, effective drainage, proper segregation, inspection, and a clearly accountable operator. The project manager's decision is therefore straightforward. Before anyone relies on the facility, the specific area must be inspected, defects must be recorded, and responsibility for operating it must be formally accepted. This control sits with construction and HSE, and it is due before use. For week 6, the required follow-up is a facility inspection, handover, and operating record. That record should identify an accountable owner, show a current date, provide objective evidence of the condition inspected, and demonstrate that any identified defects have been closed out and verified. In practical terms, this moves the project from general preparation to controlled release. The record is W05-40. And the facility should only support ongoing work once those acceptance conditions are complete. This slide is the 4th and final evidence record for controlling the rebar yard and fabrication zone during week 05. The focus is not simply on whether the facility exists, but whether it is ready to support piling mobilization safely and reliably. The record identifies the supporting facilities, including access, drainage, office and welfare arrangements, and the rebar fabrication areas. The key control point is that facility presence is incomplete until capacity, drainage, segregation, inspection, and operating responsibility have all been accepted. In practical terms, I need to inspect the specific facility, document any defects, and release it to an accountable operator before the project relies on it. This responsibility sits with construction and HSE, and the inspection is due before use. For week 06, the required control is a facility inspection, handover, and operating record under Control Record W05-41. Acceptance must identify the accountable owner, use a current date, include objective evidence, and verify that any defects are closed out. That creates a clear transition from facility preparation to controlled operation. This control record addresses a critical distinction in piling readiness. Equipment being mobilized to site does not mean it has been released for operation. Heavy piling equipment is visible in the early works area, but that is only the starting position, not evidence that all controls are complete. Before any startup or movement, the plant and workfront release pack must be signed. That release needs to confirm the platform and access arrangements, lifting controls, current equipment certification, operator authorization, exclusion zones, and protection of live services. If the equipment operates before those conditions are accepted, the project faces serious health, safety, and program exposure. My decision is therefore to hold the release until the required evidence is complete and verified. For week 06, the piling or plant manager owns the action, with a due point before operation. The control record is W05-42. Acceptance must be based on an accountable owner, a current date, an objective record, and verified closeout, including ground conditions, access, certificates, operators, and the pre-start review. Mobilized is not the same as released. This control record focuses on piling readiness in week 05, specifically the second of 3 board pile equipment checks. The key message is that equipment being mobilized and visibly ready at the early works area does not automatically mean it is released for use. Mobilized does not mean released. Before the plant starts up or moves, the piling or plant manager must sign the plant and workfront release pack. That release confirms that the platform and access are suitable, lifting arrangements are controlled, certifications are current, operators are authorized, exclusion zones are established, and any live service risks have been addressed. If work begins before those controls are accepted, the project faces serious health, safety, and program exposure. The week 06 control is therefore straightforward. Verify the ground, access, certificates, operators, and pre-start requirements before operation. Acceptance must be supported by an accountable owner, a current date, an objective record, and verified closeout. The assigned owner is the piling or plant manager, with completion required before operation, under Control Record W05-43. This control record focuses on a critical distinction in piling readiness. Equipment being mobilized to site does not mean it is released for operation. Heavy piling equipment is present and appears ready in the early works area, but that visual status is not enough to authorize startup or movement. The project risk is significant. If the equipment operates before the platform, lifting arrangements, certification, operator competency, exclusion zones, and live service controls are all accepted, the project could face severe health, safety, and program exposure. Mobilized does not mean released. The project manager's decision is therefore clear. The plant and workfront release pack must be signed before the equipment starts or moves. The piling or plant manager owns this action, and it is due before operation. For week 06, acceptance must be demonstrated through objective evidence, not assumption. That means approving the ground conditions, access, certificates, operators, and pre-start requirements, with a current date and verified closeout. The control is recorded as W05-44, with the accountable owner clearly identified. This slide records the week 05 control position for board pile rebar fabrication. The work is visibly progressing, including rebar delivery, cutting and bending, spiral production, and cage preparation. But progress alone does not confirm that the material is acceptable for permanent work. The central control is complete traceability for every lot and cage. That means each item must be tagged and connected to its material certificates, test results, approved drawing, dimensional inspection, and formal release status. We also need to control identity and condition through fabrication, including heat or batch information, welds or couplers, dimensions, and storage. If any of these records are missing or cannot be verified, acceptance could be invalidated. The project manager's decision is therefore to make the piling and QA/QC team accountable for this control. Before any cage is used, the team must complete the required records under Control Record W05-45. By week 06, acceptance requires an owner, current data, objective evidence, and verified closeout. This is the point at which visible production must become auditable, released work. This control record covers board pile rebar fabrication during week 05, with a specific focus on preserving identity and release status for each lot and cage. Rebar delivery, cutting and bending, spiral work, and cage preparation are visibly progressing, but progress alone does not establish acceptance. Every lot and cage must remain traceable from its material identity through final release. That means linking the relevant certificates and test results with the approved drawing, dimensional inspection, and release documentation. The accountable owner is piling and QA/QC, and the records must be complete before any cage is used. The project risk is significant. If heat or batch identity, dimensions, welds or couplers, storage conditions, or inspection records are uncontrolled, the permanent work may not be accepted. The project manager's decision is therefore to make tagging and document linkage mandatory, rather than relying on visual progress or informal confirmation. For week 06, the required action is to complete material and fabrication traceability under Control Record W05-46. Closeout must show an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified completion before cage use. This control record focuses on board pile rebar fabrication, specifically the third of 4 steps, preserving identity and release status. The work is visibly progressing, including rebar delivery, cutting and bending, spiral fabrication, and cage preparation. The key risk is not simply whether fabrication is moving forward. It is whether each lot and cage can be traced through its heat or batch identity, dimensions, welds or couplers, storage conditions, inspections, and final acceptance. If that evidence is incomplete, the permanent work may not be accepted, even when the physical cage appears ready. The project manager's decision is clear: tag every lot and cage, then link the supporting certificates, test results, approved drawing, dimensional inspection, and release record. Ownership sits with piling and QA/QC, and the control must be complete before the cage is used. For week 06, the required action is to complete material and fabrication traceability under Control Record W05-47. Closeout needs an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified confirmation that the action is complete. This control record focuses on the 4th and final stage of board pile rebar fabrication, with the central requirement being preserving identity and release status. The work is visibly progressing. Rebar is being delivered, cut, bent, spiraled, and assembled into cages. But progress alone does not establish acceptance. The key risk is losing traceability. If heat or batch identity, cage dimensions, welds or couplers, storage conditions, or inspection results cannot be tied back to the permanent work, the completed reinforcement may be rejected or require revalidation. The project manager's decision is therefore to tag every lot and cage, then link each tag to the relevant material certificates, test results, approved drawing, dimensional inspection, and formal release. This action belongs to piling and QA/QC, and it must be completed before the cage is used. For week 06, the control objective is complete material and fabrication traceability. The record should identify an accountable owner, use current information, include objective evidence, and show verified closeout. This requirement is captured under Control Record W05-48, with piling and QA/QC as the owner and the due point set before cage use. This control record addresses a high-risk activity in week 05, test pile excavation intended to verify the position of an underground electrical service. The excavation must not continue until live service clearance has been properly established. The key decision is to control the work through approved information and documented authorization, not assumption. The required controls include the approved utility survey, a permit to dig, the trial hole method, a defined exclusion zone, attendance by the relevant authority, and signed clearance. These safeguards are necessary because an unknown service depth or alignment, combined with uncontrolled excavation, could lead to a service strike, injury, an outage, and critical path delay. For week 06, the action is to issue both the permit to dig and the live service clearance record. The accountable owners are construction, interface, and HSE, and the deadline is before excavation continues. Acceptance is not simply verbal confirmation. It requires a named owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified closeout. This control is tracked under Record W05-49 and should remain open until every requirement is evidenced and formally closed. This control record focuses on test pile excavation, specifically the second of 4 planned activities, where the team must verify live service clearance before proceeding. The excavation is intended to confirm the position of an underground electrical service, so the risk is not simply a construction delay. Unknown depth or alignment, or excavation performed without adequate control, could lead to a service strike, injury, an outage, and impact to the critical path. The excavation must not continue until live service clearance is verified. The required control is a coordinated process. Use the approved utility survey, issue a permit to dig, apply the trial hole method, maintain the exclusion zone, ensure the relevant authority attends, and obtain signed clearance. Construction, interface, and HSE share ownership of this control. For week 06, the team must issue both the permit to dig and the live service clearance record. Acceptance depends on 4 things: a clearly accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record of what was verified, and documented closeout. The due point is before excavation continues, under Control Record W05-50. This control record focuses on the third of 4 test pile excavations, where the immediate priority is confirming the location and clearance of a live underground electrical service before work proceeds. The excavation is intended to verify the service position, but uncertainty around its depth or alignment creates a serious exposure. Uncontrolled digging could result in a service strike, injury, an outage, and delay to the critical path. My decision is that excavation cannot continue until the approved controls are in place. That means using the latest utility survey, an approved permit to dig, and the defined trial hole method, with a clear exclusion zone. The relevant authority must attend, and clearance must be formally signed rather than assumed from a discussion or an outdated drawing. For week 06, construction, interface, and HSE are jointly accountable. They must issue the permit to dig and the live service clearance record before excavation continues. Acceptance requires a named owner, a current data date, objective supporting evidence, and verified closeout, captured under Control Record W05-51. The principle is simple: no excavation proceeds on live service work without documented, witnessed clearance. This control record addresses the 4th and final test pile excavation, where the purpose is to confirm the position of an underground electrical service before work proceeds. The key concern is that the service depth and alignment are not yet sufficiently verified. If excavation is uncontrolled, the project could face a service strike, serious injury, an outage, and a critical path delay. Excavation must not continue until live service clearance is formally verified. The project manager's decision is to apply the full control process. Use the approved utility survey, issue a permit to dig, follow the trial hole method, maintain the required exclusion zone, and ensure the relevant authority attends. These steps must be supported by a signed clearance record, not just a verbal confirmation. Ownership sits with construction, interface, and HSE, with completion required before excavation continues. For week 06, the control record must show an accountable owner, the current data date, objective evidence, and verified closeout. This action is tracked under Control Record W05-52, providing a clear basis for safe authorization to proceed. This week's control record focuses on a critical transition, completing the site office handover before anyone occupies the space. Construction and fit-out are progressing across structural work, building services, and internal finishes, but physical progress alone is not enough to confirm readiness. The key decision is to complete an integrated room-by-room handover and close out all defects before occupation. That means the construction, HSE, and IT teams need to work from one coordinated acceptance process, rather than treating each area or discipline in isolation. The risk is straightforward. If electrical systems, fire arrangements, welfare facilities, communications, or document control are accepted informally or left incomplete, supervision may be weakened and emergency readiness could be compromised. For week 06, the control is to verify each of these areas with an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and documented evidence that issues are closed. The required action is therefore clear. Complete the integrated handover and defects closeout before occupation, under Control Record W05-53, with construction, HSE, and IT accountable for delivery. This control record focuses on the site office during week 05, with the objective of completing an operational handover before the space is occupied. Construction and fit-out are progressing across the structural, services, and internal work elements, but progress alone is not enough to support occupation safely and effectively. The key decision is to complete an integrated, room-by-room handover and close out all identified defects before occupation. This matters because accepting the office without confirmed electrical systems, fire arrangements, welfare provisions, communications, and document control could weaken both day-to-day supervision and emergency readiness. The responsibility sits jointly with construction, HSE, and IT, and the required action is due before occupation. For week 06, acceptance must cover power, fire, welfare, communications, and document control. Each acceptance item needs an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified closeout. In practical terms, the team should use Control Record W05-54 to demonstrate that every room and every required system is complete, documented, and ready for operational use. This week's Control Record focuses on the site office and the transition from construction and fit-out into operational use. Progress is continuing across structural work, services, and internal elements, but the key issue is whether the office is genuinely ready for occupation, not simply whether the physical work appears substantially complete. The required control is an integrated, room-by-room handover with defects fully closed out before occupation. That means each space must be checked across the relevant disciplines, including electrical systems, fire protection, welfare provisions, communications, IT, and document control. If occupation happens without those acceptances, supervision may be weakened, emergency readiness may be compromised, and important records may remain incomplete. The project manager's decision is therefore clear. Do not proceed on the basis of appearance or informal confirmation. The week 06 control is to obtain acceptance for power, fire, welfare, communications, and document control. Each acceptance needs an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective supporting record, and verified closeout. Construction, HSE, and IT own the action, with completion required before occupation, under Control Record W05-55. This control record focuses on the site office and the final steps needed before it can support occupation. Construction and fit-out are progressing across the structural, services, and internal work elements, but physical progress alone is not enough to confirm readiness. The key decision is to complete an integrated, room-by-room handover and close out defects before occupation. That means acceptance cannot be treated as a single general sign-off. Each room and each relevant system needs clear evidence that it is ready for use. The main risk is occupying the office before electrical systems, fire arrangements, welfare facilities, IT, and document control have been properly accepted. That could weaken day-to-day supervision and reduce emergency readiness. For week 06, construction, HSE, and IT share ownership of the control. Their task is to accept power, fire, welfare, communications, and document control, with completion required before occupation. Every acceptance should identify an accountable owner, use current information, include an objective record, and show verified closeout. This creates a defensible handover, rather than relying on assumptions or incomplete inspections. This control record focuses on the site office as it moves through the final stage of construction and fit-out. Progress is being made across the structural, services, and internal work elements, but physical completion alone is not enough to support occupation. The key requirement is an integrated, room-by-room handover with all defects closed out before the office is occupied. The risk is that occupation without formal acceptance of electrical systems, fire provisions, welfare facilities, communications, and document control could weaken both day-to-day supervision and emergency readiness. That is why the project manager has assigned joint ownership to construction, HSE, and IT, rather than treating handover as a single discipline activity. For week 06, the control is to verify each of those areas and record objective evidence of acceptance. Every item needs an accountable owner, a current date, a supporting record, and verified closeout. In practical terms, the office should not be considered operational simply because the rooms look complete. It becomes operational when the required systems, records, and responsibilities have been formally accepted before occupation. This slide records the first of 6 evidence items for concrete fresh test control during week 05. The key issue is not simply whether testing or trial mix activity occurred, but whether that activity can support the release of permanent work. A photograph alone is not acceptable evidence. The project needs one traceable inspection or test dossier that connects the sample to its identity, the applicable method, the material certificate, calibrated equipment, the witness, the recorded result, and the formal disposition. The project manager's decision is therefore clear. The activity must be linked to a complete, traceable dossier, and the concrete must not be used until it has been formally accepted. The QA/QC manager owns this control, with action due before production or use. For week 06, the closeout review must confirm the sample, calibration, witness, result, and disposition evidence. Acceptance also requires an accountable owner, a current date, an objective record, and verified closure. This control is tracked under Record W05-58 and forms part of the Week 05 Quality Assurance record for the data center project. This control record addresses concrete temperature and workability, identified as evidence 2 of 6 for Week 05 project control. The key issue is not simply whether an activity occurred, but whether it is supported by a complete, traceable quality dossier. No concrete or related work should be released for production or use until that evidence has been reviewed and accepted. The project manager's assessment is that the record shows trial mix or rebar test activity that may support future permanent work release. However, a photograph alone is not sufficient. The file must connect the activity to an approved method, material certificate, calibrated equipment, sample identity, witness, recorded result, and formal disposition. That is the required PM decision. Link this activity to one inspection or test dossier, and keep use prohibited until acceptance. For week 06, the QA/QC manager owns the closeout, due before production or use. The team must close the sample, calibration, witness, result, and disposition evidence. Acceptance also requires a named accountable owner, a current date, an objective record, and verified closeout under Control Record W05-59. This slide records a Week 05 Quality Assurance control for rebar sample identity, identified as evidence 3 of 6. The underlying activity appears to support a future release of permanent work, such as concrete trial mix or rebar testing. However, the key point is that a photograph alone is not sufficient evidence. The activity must be linked to one traceable inspection or test dossier before the material can be accepted or used. That dossier needs to connect the sample to the approved method, the material certificate, calibrated equipment, the required witness, the test result, and the formal disposition. The project manager's decision is therefore to prohibit production or use until acceptance is complete. Ownership sits with the QA/QC manager, with the action due before production or use, under Control Record W05-60. For week 06, the team must close the remaining evidence gaps, including sample identity, calibration, witness confirmation, results, and disposition. Closeout should show an accountable owner, a current date, an objective record, and verified completion. This converts an informal observation into a defensible project control record. This control record focuses on concrete cylinder traceability, identified as evidence 4 of 6 for week 05 project control. The central issue is not simply whether testing or trial mix activity occurred, but whether that activity can be connected to one complete, traceable inspection or test dossier. No concrete or related material should be released for production or use until the evidence has been accepted. The project manager's assessment is that the current record may support future permanent work release, but a photograph alone is not sufficient. The file must also establish the approved method, material certification, calibrated equipment, sample identity, witness involvement, test result, and formal disposition. These elements make the record objective and auditable, rather than based on visual evidence alone. The required action is assigned to the QA/QC manager, with a deadline before production or use. In week 06, the team must close the gaps around the sample, calibration, witness, result, and disposition evidence. Final acceptance depends on an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified closeout, all tracked under Control Record W05-61. This slide records the 5th piece of evidence in the crushing test witness and calibration review for week 05. The underlying activity appears to support a future release of permanent concrete or rebar work, but the record is not yet sufficient to authorize production or use. A photograph alone cannot serve as quality evidence. It must be connected to a traceable inspection or test dossier that identifies the approved method, material certificate, calibrated equipment, sample identity, witness, test result, and formal disposition. My required control is therefore clear. The QA/QC manager must link this activity to one complete dossier and prohibit use until the evidence has been reviewed and accepted. That creates a direct line from the physical test to the project decision, rather than relying on an isolated image or unsupported statement. In week 06, the team must close the remaining gaps: sample identification, calibration, witness confirmation, results, and disposition. Closure should include an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified completion. The responsible owner remains the QA/QC manager, with action due before production or use, under Control Record W05-62. This control record addresses the disposition of test results for the data center project during week 05. The evidence indicates that concrete trial mix or rebar test activity is being used to support a future release of permanent work. However, the key issue is whether that activity can be traced to a complete, formally accepted dossier. A photograph alone is not sufficient evidence. The record must connect the activity to an approved method, the relevant material certificate, calibrated equipment, identifiable samples, a witness, the test result, and a documented disposition. The project manager's decision is therefore clear. Link this activity to one traceable inspection and test dossier, and prohibit production or use until acceptance is confirmed. This places ownership with the QA/QC manager, with the control due before production or use. For week 06, the team must close the gaps around sample identity, calibration, witnessing, results, and disposition. Final acceptance requires an accountable owner, a current data date, an objective record, and verified closeout. This action is tracked under Control Record W05-63. This slide captures the critical constraints and risks requiring active decisions and follow-through on the data center project. The central rule is that risk awareness is not mitigation. Every risk needs a named response, a due date, objective evidence, and a clear escalation threshold. The first 4 risks are rated red. The most immediate concern is that official permissions, utility relocations, and usable access are not yet closed, creating a direct threat to the test pile and board pile critical path. There is also a live underground electrical service at the test pile excavation, which creates potential for a service strike, injury, outage, and delay. Design counts are current, but need date aging and controlled revisions remain incomplete, while MEP packages still lack fully linked technical, purchase order, factory acceptance, and delivery gates. The amber risks relate to workforce and plant growth outpacing permits, competence, supervision, or utilization controls, and to incomplete quality and traceability dossiers for trial mixes, rebar, and field photographs. Each owner role must convert these issues into documented actions and evidence, with escalation when thresholds are reached. This decision register is designed to prevent the workfront from waiting on unresolved authority. The key discipline is simple: record what was decided, who had the authority to decide it, what evidence supports it, and which controlled documents must change as a result. No work should advance on an assumption. The first 4 decisions are marked required. They cover official permissions and utility or access releases, authorization to begin test pile and board pile work, priorities and aging limits for CSA and MEP replies, and ownership of MEP packages, including LLE and non-LLE gate dates. Each one has a defined acceptance record, such as a permit, a signed workfront release checklist, current transmittals, or a package gate register. 2 further decisions remain open. The first concerns plant, logistics, and HSE controls for the exact workfront and shift. The second concerns acceptance of quality dossiers and the CXL0 and CXL1 system baseline. These items require traceable records, not informal agreement. The practical message is that decisions become actionable only when authority, evidence, status, and document updates are all visible. This slide turns the Week 05 meeting outcomes into a controlled action register for Week 06. The key principle is that an action is not complete simply because someone has worked on it. It must have an owner, a due point, and explicit evidence of acceptance or verification. The 8 actions are therefore the immediate control priorities for the project. First, project controls must close or carry forward actions A04-01 through A04-08 with clear acceptance evidence. The project and interface team must secure written permissions and close the power, gas, and access milestones. Before construction starts, the required permits and releases must be signed for piling, live services, platforms, plant, and quality. Design must also issue the aging of CSA and MEP need dates, while MEP, procurement, and commissioning reconcile every long lead and non-long lead package against technical, purchase order, factory acceptance, and need dates. The remaining actions focus on plant, competence, HSE, logistics, concrete, and rebar traceability, and carrying every open reference into Week 06 until verified closure. Most are critical, so progress must be evidenced, not assumed. This conclusion brings together what Week 05 actually demonstrates: real mobilization, ongoing engineering activity, site preparation, quality work, and clearer visibility of MEP procurement. But the management conclusion remains conditional. Readiness only becomes progress when official permissions, live utility and access constraints, design, plant, quality, and workfront acceptance are aligned to the same data date and program need. For project leadership, the priority is one decision spine. That means carrying every open predecessor, approving the exact gate for piling release, and measuring progress against objective quantities and an accepted successor workfront, rather than against activity alone. Engineering and MEP, including commissioning, must turn registers into need date control, with current revisions, clear package ownership, system boundaries, technical approvals, purchase orders, factory acceptance testing, builder's work, and tagged acceptance. Construction, HSE, and QA/QC also need assurance scaled to the operating environment. 194 personnel, 50 plant units, and interfaces with live services. Every release should be workfront specific, supported by traceable dossiers. The practical management cycle is straightforward. Week 04 commitment, Week 05 evidence, acceptance decision, named owner, verified closeout, and a credible Week 06 forecast. This reference slide provides the abbreviation and control glossary for the data center project, helping ensure that project terminology is used consistently across the team. The list covers the main delivery disciplines and control processes. For example, CSA means civil, structural, and architectural, while MEP refers to mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. It also includes commissioning and testing terms, such as CX for commissioning, FAT for factory acceptance test, and IST for integrated systems testing. The glossary also supports document and field control. MAR is a material approval request, RFI is a request for information, SD means shop drawing, and WMS means work method statement. Inspection and quality terms include ITP, IR, and NCR, while commercial and operational references include PO, ONM, SLA, and LLE. The key control principle is that these definitions and status thresholds are project-specific. They must be confirmed in the approved project controls plan and commissioning plan, rather than assumed from general industry usage. This keeps reporting, approvals, testing, and meeting records aligned across the project. Week 5's control cycle is complete, but the work now shifts from mobilization to officially released, accepted, and measurable delivery. In Week 6, we need to close the written permission, PLN and gas relocation, and usable access gates, then authorize test piles and board piling through one integrated workfront release. We'll also recover CSA and MEP dispositions, freeze technical and commissioning gates, and accept plant, HSE, logistics, concrete, and rebar evidence before use. Every open predecessor and ID remains active until verified closure. Each owner brings objective evidence, not a verbal status.